It's time for Unshelved 2, and we're going to be going over the final story of Joyce's Dubliners, The Dead. All right, so it's been about 3 months, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, since I finished The Dead, and when I did, it really slammed me. The amount of layers and depth and density was just not overwhelming, but the heart, it just smashes you. And that's my initial thought right off the bat. Let's see, I have a billion notes that I loosely tried to organize. Hey, we're gonna be a hipster. Ready? Pocketbook. Is that a New England pocketbook? No, it's the pocket book. So, once again, I'll show you. Tried to organize everything. The Dead, the final story in Dubliners, and it's a perfect wrap up to not only the book Dubliners and the beautiful story arc and the way all these short stories tie together, but it's like a perfect wrap up to life and also the year. It ends in the snow. So like I said before, I'd read it a while ago and I couldn't just react to it, and that's kind of what's making this a little more difficult, because it's still foggy in the mind, but also I needed to have time for it to simmer. I needed to let it sit for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more entrenched I became, and the more I was like, it was just incredible. One of the most incredible things I've ever read. But let's get into it. And one quote that I did really enjoy was, he said, "Young man at the age of 40. I like that. I'm 38. So we're gonna get into Gabriel, who's our main protagonist, and he's our protagonist, and he's late to a dinner party that his aunt's. Like I said, it's gonna be foggy. That's how eloquent we're gonna be. We're gonna be foggy about this. Main points, big pictures, and what I think. So, if you're looking for in-depth and professors elsewhere, are we gonna get windy? I don't have the microphones are in the truck, but I wasn't doing it. So Gabriel shows up late with his wife to the family, his aunts, 2 aunts, and their niece's Christmas party. And there's gonna be a number of guests, and he's returning to Dublin. And some of the notes that I have, I just had written down: guilt, personal freedom, duty. He has a discussion with Mrs. Ivors, I don't know exactly how to say it, and I wrote down, I find her irritating. In the discussion, she's kind of grilling him on where you been, what are you doing, what's the deal, and it's got like this kind of guilty vibe to it. And he says, a couple things I had written down in those notes was literature above politics, awesome. And you learn a bit more about Gabriel himself, and I think it was, in my version, it was page 128. The flag freaked me out right there. I thought someone was coming up on me. He's a traveler. Gabriel's a traveler. He's a family man. He kind of has like this stoic inner persona to him. He does book reviews, and when asked, where have you been? He's been on a cycling tour. A cycling tour? My man. I immediately related with this guy. I thought it was great. And I was more sucked in, and you could see how he's trying to paint a picture of Gabriel as this fine, great man of not like high stature, but like a good man. And for the sake of tradition, he's thinking about our busy lives, hospitality, and to not lose that. He doesn't want to lose the hospitality and that's what that word is, the Irish culture, that I got the impression that he kind of felt forced to talk about certain things, and he was pushed in a direction by said circumstances, and it didn't really resonate with him. And then he starts talking about tradition, hospitality, and that these are things inherently in Irish culture that we should cherish, we pull out of our lives to go and meet, and to, even though it's like a pain to like go see your family and do the thing at Christmas time, it should not be lost. And along with that, there's a lot of traditions that are being discussed, the politics of Ireland at the time, the back and forth with religion. Gabriel was writing for a unionist paper, and there was like a lot of shade being thrown around. And in the party, there's dancing, and there's a number of interpersonal layers with a lot of the other characters. But like I said, foggy, and I'm giving you the unshelved big picture. Let's see, and these windows and other discussions and the moods and the attitudes seem to be reflective of Joyce's opinions of life and culture at the time, and you just see his biases, and it's revelatory to see how he can get such a message across in such small amount of words. Like poetic is how this was written, and the reading of it wasn't the easiest read. It was work, but it wasn't the hardest thing. And I know Joyce has quite the reputation for making you reread stuff. Now, after the party, after he gives his speech and everyone loves it, they go back in, and I forget exactly who was singing. It was I forget the name, but it was one of the older women there who has been known to have a beautiful voice, and she sang a song called "The Lass of Aughrim," and that sends Gabriel's wife, Greta, I think that's her name, into she kind of has a flashback of a gentleman or a boy named Michael Fury who wound up dying at 17. I forget why, but he died, and he absolutely loved Greta, and he stood outside her window and he sang this song. So it just sparked, and she was vulnerable enough to later say, this is the gig with that story. And you see Gabriel is human. He becomes jealous, and he like the ego erupts, the shame, the poor self-talk, and I held him in super high regard and relatable, like, yeah. But then when Joyce starts discussing the inner shame and the self-talk and it's just, that made him so much more human and that much more relatable. And then the way Joyce paints the after party with his wife alone, the way that he describes the alone time that he finally has, the quiet and the one-on-one, it is so real. Like you can feel it. I'm getting rained down a little bit. Yeah, jealousy, the time, and he's realizing that he's comparing himself to a dead boy, and that again, he's like, what am I doing? And how human is that? And he goes into a deep level of reflection and introspection, and he begins to question his own love, and if he is even worthy of being with Greta. And Michael Fury, the face that braved death, he was saying that she was no longer the woman that Michael Fury knew, that she had grown, she has become somebody else. And just these kinds of thoughts, this layer, this perspective, is not something that I was used to in literature, and in the short amount of pages of the Dead, it smacks you. Towards the end of the story, he's sitting there, and I think I remember his wife is asleep, and he's reflecting, and he finally comes to realize like what he's thinking, what he's doing, the fact that he's comparing himself now to then, and he's like, what was I doing? Why did I act like that? Why did I have these thoughts? And he's looking out the window, and he's seeing snow, and then there's the whole metaphor of the snow and thinking of the dead. And for me, it was like the snow, it's like the snow covers everything, like that. It's coming for all of us, and while it is a clean slate, the blanket of the snow is you're still going to be able to see the lumps and ruffles of life underneath it, but there's a renewal, there's a refreshing. Take a deep breath, realize, move on. The empathy that he has for, at that moment, himself, his family. It's like concentric rings. It's like start with the self, and he's like empathy, reflection, forgiveness of himself, and then it expands to his next circle, everyone at the party, and then national culture, and then the world, and then the dead themselves. And I've spoiled it enough, but if you read this, the last sentence is, wow. Incredible. And that's when I knew this was not going to be pushed into one of my other episodes, that it needed a full sit down and think through, and it needed simmer time. It needed to be in the crock pot for a while. The melancholy, and it's not just an Irish story. It's a human story. It's a story about people, and it has standed said test of time because it was published in 1914. I think it was written in 1906 or 07. That's a little muddy, but overall, and I'm kind of new to this kind of fiction and this level of literature, but the modernist, and it really solidified for me the difference between just reading something and picking something up, and this is literature. This is what we're talking about. This is a whole different level of art with words. So if you haven't read The Dead by Joyce, I highly recommend it. I will definitely be rereading it again, probably around Christmas time, and I'm going to be searching for more Joyce that is consumable. It was a fantastic read, a perfect challenge, and it's definitely going to stick with me. It is a story that has left a scar, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Thank you guys for checking out Unshelved 2. We'll be doing more of them, and let me know what you think. That's that. This is me doing my thing, hanging out with the dead. I hope you all enjoyed my analysis, and I'll be there shortly myself, like the rest of you. Later.